Hey guys, what's happening? Thanks for watching, tuning in, coming back, and all that stuff. I appreciate it very much, and hope you're having an awesome day. In this video, I'm going to talk about how, when you have white clouds, or let's say mist, or steam, or fog, or something like that in a scene, and then, if you change contrast, for example, it can impact the colors and make the clouds a little less vibrant or white, really is what it comes down to. Or if you adjust the saturation, blue in particular, like if you're changing the temperature to make the scene more blue, maybe it's blue skies and you're trying to make more of a blue scene, you'll often notice that the clouds will pick up that blue. And this video is about how to keep those whites nice and crisp without having the colors from, I don't know why I move my hands like this, but well, clouds are in the sky, so imagine they're up here. Anyway, how to keep the clouds nice and crisp and white while still having your saturation and that sort of thing do whatever it is you want it to do in the photo. So in other words, how to keep the colors from bleeding over and sort of mucking up your whites. And that's what we're going to talk about. So I've got two photos to share with you today. And admittedly, there aren't clouds in them per se. I'm actually working on a couple of photos that I took in Yellowstone where geysers are giving off this awesome mist. And one of the great things about taking photos there in Yellowstone is there are these geysers that give off this, foggy mist that's just really cool. And so it's basically the same as a cloud. It's a white chunk of haze that ends up not being very white. So let me shut up and show you. So here's the first photo. So in this case, all I did really here is just adjust the contrast, bumped up the shadows a little bit, and left whites and blacks the same, gave it a little bit of clarity. So I went from that to that. Oh, you can see I also did lens distortion. That is on that tab there. So anyway, I went from that to that. Now, if you look at the mist, it's kind of white, but the blue is kind of muddying it up a little bit. So if you were to go like this and kind of make your scene more blue because maybe you really wanted to bring up those blues, guess what? Those whites get really blue, and we're not all about that. Like, I think it's important to distinguish the whites from the other colors. I think it gives the photo some more contrast, and I think it makes it look not just more realistic, but it just looks better, right? Like blue clouds don't really occur a whole lot. Now, sunsets, there's like orange and yellows and pinks and things like that that may be hitting the clouds. That's different. I'm generally talking about middle of the day when you have blue sky, but you want your clouds to be nice and white. So here's what I did. So that's my basic level. I went and added another image layer, or actually an erased image layer. And all I did is I took those cars out. If you look over here on the road, there are a couple of cars. Now they're there, now they're gone. So just a quick erase with the eraser tool. And then I added a new adjustment layer. You could actually add filters to this layer, but whenever I have an erased image layer, so you probably know if you go up here and use the eraser tool, when you hit save or whatever, it comes back as its own layer. Even though you can stick filters on that layer, I like to keep those things separate in case I ever want to go back and do something on that layer or remove it or whatever. I just like to keep my adjustments off of the erased image layer. So what I did is I said plus new adjustment layer, and I added that, and that's this adjustment layer. So here's how I did that. You can kind of tell already what I did. The first thing I did is I took the saturation down, and then what I did is I went and masked that in just to that steamy area where all this steam is coming off. You can kind of see my mask. I basically just wiped it in at a lower opacity over most of this area just to cover that and take the saturation down. And so that's what the mask looked like. So I went from that, where there's more blue in it, to that where there's more white. Now it also impacts this layer here, which is actually that steam rising off of that geothermal pool. However, there is blue in the pool, but there's more steam, so I wanted that to be less saturated, so that's what that is. And then all I did is I wanted to use the same mask, so you can just say, click on this filter that you just did and say mask copy, and then I went and added another filter, which is a tone filter, and you can just come down here and say mask paste. It's not turned on, so I can't do that, but all I did is bumped up the whites there. So if you look over here, I added whites on the tone filter to 100. I added the smart tone to 100, added a little bit of contrast. I could also bump the exposure if I wanted to. That would make them really white, right? I don't want to overdo it, but maybe a little bit more wouldn't hurt. So I'm getting the white back. And now if you look at, there's the before and the after. And let me show you the total before. There's the before and there's the after. I'm really starting to get a nice look, I think, to that mist. Here I took the exposure filter, dragged it to the left, and then painted into these rocks right there simply because it was getting too bright. That's all. And then the last thing, I took that same mask from up here, edit, copy mask, and then edit, paste mask. And I just put it on this filter on the whites and blacks. And once again, I bumped the whites up really high, this time 70. And so let me show you the before this layer. If you look at the mist there, there's the before. The mist is kind of lost. It's kind of blue. It's kind of gray, kind of hazy. You can see that it's this misty steam coming off of the geothermal, I can't even say that, geothermal pool. But it's kind of lost, like the impact of it's lost. And frankly, that's one of the reasons I took the photos, is because I liked that mist coming off it. And now with this layer, it's really white. In fact, it's probably too white. Some of that is because I bumped up the exposure here. I'm going to take that back to 0. And I could take some of these whites down if I wanted. You can make all those adjustments once you have your masks and filters in place, and then just kind of play with it. You could also play with the opacity of this layer if you wanted to do that. Although keep in mind that I have this filter, the exposure filter on this layer, that's not related to that mist. Oops, that's my next photo. I'm going to get to that one in a second. Hang on, go back. There we go. I jumped ahead. That's one thing about being in the library. You can jump ahead to multiple photos, and I just did that in Luminar 3. Anyway, so that's how I do it. It's a very simple idea, but I see that a lot of times where people will have a blue sky and they got nice clouds or whatever, and they've dragged the blue so much that they're saturating, that blue is bleeding into the white clouds. And if it's a daytime white puffy cloud sort of thing, I want white puffy clouds, not blue puffy clouds. This is an example of how to do it. Let me jump into this next photo and show you one more example, which you've kind of already seen, but I'll walk you through that workflow too. Okay, here's the photo after, and let me show you the before. There's before. You can see in the before photo that the mist is looking really gray instead of white, and it's steam basically coming out of this geothermal pool. What is this one called? Grand Prismatic. It's really cool. It's actually amazing. Anyway, the color's the color is bleeding into that and creating a color hue that's kind of grayish blue, kind of steely in the clouds. And I don't want that. I want them to be white, and I wanted to bring up that orange because it's really it's very vibrant in real life. So let me show you how I did that. Okay, so I started with a develop filter, and I don't think I did any lens stuff there. No, I didn't. So let me show you what develop filter did. There's the base unedited photo, and there it is after develop. And so you can see here, I even moved the whites up to 100, and it didn't really get the job done. And so all I did, a little bit of warmth, some contrast, bumped up the whites and the clarity. And I was like, I like the photo. I like the shape of that section that's a little bit lighter orange here. And I like the steam coming off of it and how it's kind of rising up to sort of meet the hillside. So I liked all that, but it didn't have enough impact for me. So if you saw my last video, which is there, I'm pretty sure, about bicolor toning, super awesome filter. When I was recording this, which is now for me, but later for you. Anyway, while I was recording this and editing this photo, that filter was top of mind. So I slapped some bicolor toning on there. And as you can see, it had a nice impact. It's great for landscapes and seascapes, as I talked about. For the top color, I went kind of neutral, I went really neutral in the center. Now I could go more white, which would be all the way there. I just kind of went there, that far to the left. So it kind of that's the brightness slider I talked about in that video. So I kind of went bright, and I went right in the center, which is kind of whitish gray. It helped with the color a little bit. And then in the bottom, I just went to the orange realm and, similar kind of brightness level. But I think bicolor toning made a nice little impact from there to there, starting to give the photo a little bit of life. And then let's get into this fixing the steam. Once again, it was whites and blacks. In this case, I did it across the entire photo because it actually brightened the image. And I think beforehand, the image was a little bit dark. And so when you pull the whites like that, it may have the impact of brightening the entire image. Probably depends on the image, but in this case, it did. Added a little Orton effect to give it some mood. It helps bring up the shadow. It also, if you notice, it kind of accentuates those whites, right? Because they get kind of brighter because the stuff around them is kind of darker. So there's before Orton and after. I also like that it creates that kind of higher contrast look, which I was going for here. And then here's the similar steps that I did in the last one. In this case, I took saturation and vibrance down and I masked it in quite a bit. Right there, I missed a little bit, of course. So anyway, I just painted that in, and then that was a -64 on saturation. And so let me show you the before and after. There's the before. You can see it's kind of blue. It's still picking up that bluish sort of color. And after now, it's more, recognizably white. And then this time I did the exposure filter. And this was, I just bumped the exposure up. I took the same mask from the saturation and vibrance filter. Just did a, edit, copy, and edit, paste of the mask. And then I just dragged it here, or put it here on the whatever you call that, on the mist. And just bumped up the exposure. So that allowed me to get wider. Now I could go a lot more, but I don't want to overdo it. And in fact, if you didn't know this, a good way to check this is to turn on your, it's basically your hot and cold pixel indicator. So anything that's blown out will be red, right? So that tells me that I've got those blown out parts. So I can pull that down. Now that's basically not blown out. Like that is blown out. So if I turn off the hot and cold pixels, those are basically blown there. So I'm going to take that back down. That's a good way to use it as an indicator. And if you get rid of most of the red, it doesn't have to be all of it, but if you get rid of the majority of the red, something like that is going to look fine. So that's basically how I did that. And using those indicators in your histogram is a great way to keep track of, hey, things are hot or cold. By the way, the cold ones, I don't really care, honestly. It just means that they're basically absolute black in those areas. But I don't really care. A lot of that is the high contrast and the Orton effect that's creating that really dark area. But again, it's not a focal point of the photo. I'm trying to bring up the colors and the contrast between the light and dark, and then add some whiteness to that mist. And so that's how I did it. And so before, you can see the mist is really kind of bluish gray, kind of boring, and the photos is kind of blasé. And now, you may not like it, and that's okay, but I've got the color back thanks to bicolor toning. And with the other edits, I've got the mist looking really white and standing out against that darker background, which is what I wanted to do. So again, I didn't use this on clouds. It's the exact same idea. If you've got a bunch of white puffy clouds, well, they don't have to be puffy, but white clouds, and they're taking on color, use these techniques to get that color out of your clouds and make them white again. Super easy, super fun, and works every time. So that's it for this one, my friends. Hit like, share with your friends, subscribe if you haven't, and leave me a comment. Let me know what you think about it. And thanks for watching. I appreciate it very much. I'll see you next time, friends. Take care. Adios.